Is Harvard complicit in Chinese genocide and lying about it? A former NYPD officer is arrested for stalking a Chinese dissident on behalf of the CCP, and Xi Jinping's desperate attempt to woo countries back to his side is failing. Then more on this week's China News headlines. Let's start off with something a little ridiculous. A Maryland man has pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud with a man living in China. Here's how the scheme worked. Min Fong Nok Vong, from the town of Bowie, Maryland, submitted a fake resume to trick U.S. companies into hiring him as a remote software developer. But the work was actually done by a man in China, using remote access software Vong installed on the laptops he was given by the companies. Vong was then paid for the work, kept a cut, and sent the rest to the man in China. In total, Vong admitted to quote-unquote earning over $970,000 not doing IT work. Now he's facing up to 20 years in prison. Why so many years? Well, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, several of these defrauded companies contracted out Vong's services to U.S. government agencies in addition to the FAA. As a result of Vong's fraudulent misrepresentations, these government agencies unknowingly granted Vong's co-conspirators access to sensitive U.S. government systems, which they accessed from China. And it gets even worse. It was apparently all part of a North Korean scheme to fund its nuclear program.
Here are screen grabs of the North Korean allegedly posing as Vong. According to a sweeping federal indictment, the North Korean is an IT worker, part of an army of North Koreans, mostly in China and Russia, who are scamming their way into U.S. companies to do lucrative freelance IT work and then send the U.S. cash they earn to the North Korean regime, which is desperate for Western money to fund its nuclear weapons program.
Apparently, Vong got roped into all this after being contacted by someone he was playing video games with online. Stay safe out there, kids. Meanwhile, an ex-NYPD officer has been sentenced to 18 months in jail after being convicted of helping China stalk an expat. In 2023, Michael McMahon was convicted of aiding a transnational pressure campaign aimed at convincing a former Chinese city official to leave the U.S. and return to China. The city official, named Xu Jin, left China in 2010 after the Chinese Communist Party accused him and his wife of bribery. They denied the charges, and Xu's wife testified that the official was unfairly targeted for challenging the Chinese power structure. Later, in the U.S., Xu says he received a threatening note on his door telling him to go to prison in China in order to protect his family there, and that the CCP even flew in his father to convince him to return. Of course, China denies ever threatening dissidents abroad. I mean, come on. That doesn't sound like something the CCP would do. How could anyone think such a thing? McMahon was among 10 people charged in the federal case investigating China's Operation Fox Hunt initiative pursuing overseas dissidents. 2 other co-conspirators were also sentenced to prison. U.S. District Judge Pamela Chen said McMahon aided a campaign of transnational repression that harmed the targeted man, his family, and the United States. She also accused McMahon, who claims to have been unaware of working on behalf of the CCP, of ignoring clear warning signs when he agreed in 2016 to help find Xu Jin. McMahon claims that he was told investigating Wu was for a Chinese construction company hoping to get embezzled cash, and acknowledges that he did gather surveillance on Xu and also looked him up on law enforcement and government databases. McMahon is getting some support because it appears that he was duped and deceived, but he's due to report to prison in June. The Philippines is calling China's arrest of alleged spies an act of retaliation. Manila has been engaging in a crackdown on networks of alleged Chinese spies in the island country, which is notable since the Philippines and China are clashing over disputed territories in the South China Sea. But Chinese authorities have now detained 3 Filipino men, accusing them of spying for the Philippine government. Beijing accused the men of gathering intelligence on the PLA for the Philippine Intelligence Services, which Manila denies. The Assistant Director of the Philippine National Security Council, or NSC, said that they are law-abiding citizens with no criminal records and were vetted and screened by the Chinese government prior to their arrival there. He also explained that the men were former recipients of a government scholarship program created under an agreement between China's Hainan Island and the Philippines' Palawan province. He believes, as others do, that this was a politically motivated retaliation for Manila's arrest of alleged CCP spies, which, considering the circumstances, isn't a stretch. But China has even more reason to be upset because Google has now labeled the western part of Philippine waters as the West Philippine Sea. Wow. Google and YouTube have been soft censoring China Uncensored and other voices critical of the CCP while promoting pro-CCP propaganda. But if they keep doing stuff like this, I might actually forgive them. Harvard University may have committed a sanctions violation by hosting and giving training to a Chinese paramilitary organization responsible for genocide in Xinjiang. Ah, the Ivy Leagues. As controversial as ever. The Ivy League schools were already in hot water due to controversy over accepting foreign gifts, mainly in the form of donations. For Harvard, one of these donations included a $350 million gift from the Chan family of well-connected Hong Kong real estate tycoons to Harvard Public Health School back in 2014. Harvard even renamed the school in their honor. 4 years later, the Chan School of Public Health formalized partnerships with 7 Chinese institutions through the Harvard-China Health Partnership, or HCHP. One of those was the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, or XPCC. They received training in 2019 and 2023 from the HCHP. So, what does the XPCC do? It's a state-run paramilitary corporate conglomerate that operates in Xinjiang. The XPCC runs prisons, a media empire, agricultural projects, and the education system in the area. It's basically a parallel government that administers Xinjiang. And as such, it has played a critical role in suppressing Uyghur life, culture, and identity, including through extrajudicial internment and imprisonment, land expropriation, forcible migration, repressive and preemptive policing, social engineering, religious persecution, and forced labor. It was so bad that in 2020, the U.S. sanctioned the organization. And while this occurred after the 2019 training, it happened before the 2023 training, hence Harvard being accused of violating sanctions. The investigation is ongoing, but cases like these just raise even more questions about foreign funding, especially from China, in some of America's best schools, and add fuel to the fire for the Trump administration's war on Harvard. And after the break, China isn't doing too well in the trade war. Welcome back. The U.S. says a Chinese satellite company is aiding attacks by the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen. The Houthis have been firing at U.S. and other ships in the Red Sea since fall 2023, in what they call solidarity with Gaza. And last month, the Trump administration began a military operation to degrade and perhaps destroy the terrorist group. State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce said their actions and Beijing's support of the company, even after our private engagements with them, is yet another example of China's empty claims to support peace. The company in question is Changguang Satellite Technology Company, which was sanctioned by the U.S. in 2023 for providing support to Russian Wagner mercenaries fighting in Ukraine. China denies that the company is helping the Houthis and says it's working to stabilize the Red Sea tensions. But according to other reports, China rejected U.S. appeals to stop the satellite imagery support. You'd think that with China being so pro-trade and the Red Sea being a major shipping route, this wouldn't be the case. But considering how close the CCP is with the Houthis' backer in Tehran, it shouldn't be a big surprise. The only question is, what will the White House do about this? 62 Taiwanese military members have been found to have Chinese residency permits. These permits give the person holding them the right to live in China, which means it's possible some of these troops could just flee to the mainland should war come to the island. It's legal to have these documents in Taiwan, but it can impact access to sensitive information. Obviously, Taipei is very concerned about this, especially given the increase in the CCP's influence operations, hacks, and spying in Taiwan over the past year. Defense Minister Wellington Koo told a legislative hearing last Wednesday that the service members will be banned from handling intelligence or other confidential data, which is a great idea considering all the Chinese military drills in the area lately. And despite Xi Jinping's best efforts to court Vietnam to his side in the trade war, it doesn't appear this is working out very well. Instead, according to reports, after a long series of talks, Vietnam has reportedly reached a deal with the U.S. on an F-16 fighter jet purchase. If confirmed, this would mark the biggest arms deal between Hanoi and Washington ever signed. Despite sharing communism, Vietnam and China have had a troubled relationship. And China's increasing aggression in the South China Sea and territorial disputes with Vietnam aren't making this any easier. So these jets could obviously deter the CCP from doing anything rash. Neither the US nor Vietnam have confirmed the report, and some analysts are skeptical that the deal will go through, given Vietnam's usual reliance on Russian arms imports. But the quality of Russian weapons leaves a lot to be desired. On top of that, the deal, which could see Vietnam acquire up to 24 F-16s, could help the country reach a favorable deal in its trade talks with the US. And so could Vietnam joining South Korea in cracking down on Chinese goods skirting US tariffs. Washington has openly accused Chinese companies of using Vietnam to dodge US duties by making it a transshipment hub, a place where Chinese-made parts are assembled, slapped with a Made in Vietnam label, and forwarded to the United States. Vietnam, which relies heavily on exports, ships a lot of goods to America that are made with Chinese components, which helps the CCP avoid some level of tariffs. But in talks with Peter Navarro, an influential trade advisor in the White House, Vietnam promised vaguely to crack down on fraud. While part of this may be due to the trade talks, Vietnam is also cracking down on fraud in US-made goods shipped through its territory to China. So it's entirely possible that this is just a general crackdown on fraud. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But finally, China has come up with a novel way to fight back against the US trade war: poison Americans. Yes, China, well known for sending toxic and poisonous products to the US, has now said they won't supervise veterinary drugs and medical devices leaving the country. I'm so glad almost all of our medical supplies are made in China. That was a good idea. Before you go, click on this video here from my gaming channel about why so many video games are about killing God and how atheism has affected the modern world. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.